Hi, I'm Meta Spencer. Today's kind of weird. My main guest has not shown up. So we're going to wait and no, we're not going to wait. We're going to go ahead and wing it. Because my friend Richard Denton is with me in his from his home in Sudbury, is it? I think.
Yes.
And I asked him to be on the show because he's the person who referred me to Sharon Tennyson. Sharon Tennyson is a lady in California who has San Mateo, I think, that area, and she has led more than 100 tours to Russia, or I guess certainly she started during the Soviet days. And she's an elderly woman. She's almost my age, and so he thought we ought to get acquainted. So we started to get acquainted, but I kind of dropped the ball at some point. And now I thought, well, we'll have a conversation about Russia, because this is a time when everybody's worried about what to do and what to make of the Russian activities in Ukraine. Well, I don't know where she went, but she's not here. So, but Richard, thank goodness, is. So we're going to, I don't know what we're going to talk about, but Richard, tell me this. Were you on one of the tours that she led or what?
No, I'm with IPPNW, and we, the
Excuse me,
organization.
I should tell them IPPNW is the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War. And Richard Denton has been a North American co-chair of that organization, which is very much it's a Nobel Peace Prize winning organization that did a whole lot during the Cold War to try to change policies, especially with regard to nuclear weapons. And they had a lot of influence. So, back to you, Richard.
Thank you very much for filling the audience in on that, because I tend to use these acronyms, unfortunately, which people don't understand. So thank you. We did receive the Nobel Peace Prize in 1985 because two cardiologists, Bernard Lown of Boston, who invented the defibrillator, and a prominent cardiologist, Eugene Shahov, in the Soviet Union, had got together, and because they were the cardiologists to our or the mutual presidents of the U.S. and the Soviets, were able to have some influence on them to get them to uh, try to break the Cold War, at which time there was about 70,000 nuclear weapons in the world. And we've now got down to about 13,500, but with Russia and the U.S. having about 6,000 approximately each.
By the way, do you know whether they're continuing to dismantle them, or have they reached the number that they had agreed to reach in the New START treaty?
Now, all the nine nuclear countries are updating, modernizing their nuclear weapons.
Mhm.
So you can sort of disable, you can maintain the plutonium pit, which is that little ball of plutonium in the middle, and modernize the delivery system, modernize the actual size of the nuclear bomb as well. So that is an ongoing process. Uh, Certainly, I would like to point out that South Africa did have nuclear weapons, and they have now got rid of them, and that was done under the auspices of the International Atomic Energy Agency. And so we do have verification, and verification does work. Britain was uh, at one time dismantling some nuclear weapons, and Norway was monitoring, doing part of that verification. So verification does work. Unfortunately, though, all 9 nuclear countries are now modernizing.
Well, yes, the modernization thing is going full stream ahead, but are they at the same time dismantling some of the older weapons?
Correct.
And therefore there will be fewer weapons, but better, more spiffy uh, weapons than they had 10 years ago.
I would say that they're decreasing the actual number of nuclear weapons, but they are certainly modernizing. Now,
Okay,
Britain,
but this 13,500 is a little bit less than I was hearing 2 or 3 years ago. We were saying everybody was saying 15,000 at that point. So that's really my question. Are they reducing the numbers still? And do they have a way to go? When they signed this new START treaty, I'm sure, I don't know the number, but they probably set a target of how many they should wind up still owning at the end. But I don't know what the target was, whether they're finished the disarming of their agreed number or not.
well, you're quite right, Meta, is just again sort of a mnemonic is the SMART mnemonic, which says is it's a project specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time based. And the problem with the Non-Proliferation Treaty was that it was not time-based. It was just that the nuclear countries at that time, the 5 that are also on the Security Council, were going to get rid of their nuclear weapons in good faith. 52 years later, they have not got rid of their nuclear weapons. So, and I think this is the
Oh,
problem.
they will say, but we will. We just haven't done it yet. But don't push us.
Exactly, and it's not a good time, or conditions are not right, et cetera, et cetera. But 52 years later, they have not done it, and so this is why we definitely need a time that things will happen and actual numbers. And I think the difference between 15,000 and 13,005 is again accuracy in counting the nuclear weapons, and we've been getting more accurate. And so I would have said that it may have been 15,000 because that was as best we could obtain at that time, but now it's around 13,500, 13,300, 13,350, etc.
Well, it must be though that if they have this treaty, this New START treaty, which is they've had it since Obama got it going, they must have some system for each side having some way of checking. That they must not just say, well, just take our guess. We don't even know ourselves how many we've got, but we're kind of working on it. I think they must have a system for, I don't know,
Well,
verification.
again, it's cloaked in secrecy, but there are spies, and
Yeah.
so there are ways of verifying it. And certainly, the International Atomic Energy Agency can go around and check on numbers and check on that. But I don't think we need to get hung up on the actual numbers, Meta. The point is that we want to get to 0 nuclear weapons.
Absolutely.
And so that's the objective. Just to though go back, Britain unfortunately is now actually making more nuclear weapons. It had about 150, and it's now saying that they're going to go up to about 250. So Britain is an exception that they are actually making more new nuclear weapons, which again goes against the NPT, which they're a signatory to. So that's the problem. I think where Sharon comes in is that in any negotiation, you need to have trust, and you need to have a relationship with the other person. And it's difficult to have a relationship if you don't know the other people, and this has been particularly difficult for all of us because we're meeting here on Zoom. I think, with you and myself, we've met personally, face to face, and so we've been able to build up our rapport. And now we can continue that over Zoom. But with a lot of people, that certainly there hasn't been the trust, and that's what we've seen now with the Ukraine. Uh, Reagan and Gorbachev agreed that NATO would not venture east, and that was the basis for the unification of Germany. And at that time, NATO was about 7 members, and now they're up to about 30 members. And by moving east and the various post-Soviet states have now joined with NATO. And so I think that Ukraine is the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, that Putin has said no way that Ukraine will become a member of NATO, will get nuclear weapons. And when negotiations were not happening, he has invaded. Now, I'm certainly not an apologist for Putin. Certainly, any war is terrible. The atrocities that are going on in Ukraine are deplorable, and we want that war to stop immediately and for negotiations to occur. And I find it's sort of ironic that the whole purpose of nuclear weapons is deterrence. Deterrence does not work against accidents, miscalculations, terrorists, or someone who's threatening to use them. And so now the West is being deterred by Putin because he's threatening the use of nuclear weapons. So that's a point that deterrence is not working.
But I'm sorry, it is working.
Well,
It is working in the sense that, Putin is deterring the U.S. from doing this
no-fly zone.
no-fly zone. Yeah, Zelensky wants that, and the U.S. won't do it because Biden clearly thinks, and I think he's undoubtedly right, that it would be crossing the line that would really lead to a war, a direct war between the U.S. and Russia. So, and then, we know that he's very willing, apparently, to use nuclear weapons, or he's not completely unwilling, let's put it that way. I've just been reading an article this morning by Graham Allison about this, about his, you can't really say that he wouldn't do it, So,
Well, several leaders have said that they would push the button. Margaret Thatcher said she would push the button, and she was almost going to do that during the Falkland War with Argentina. And there's been several other close calls where people have certainly threatened the use and were about to use, but luckily did not. During the Korean War, that was just after 1945, when the U.S. had dropped the 2 bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That was the war in 1950. And if the conventional hadn't gone well, then again, nuclear weapons were, quote, the backup.
Yeah, but I'm trying to understand what you mean when you say deterrence isn't working, because to me, the unfortunate reality is that this situation has proved that deterrence does work, because Putin is deterring the U.S. And if you could certainly say that if Ukraine had kept their nuclear weapons, and of course they didn't really have control over them, but if they'd kept them and had control, or if they'd even built their own afterwards, that Putin wouldn't have invaded. So, it works. And I wish it didn't. Do I wish it didn't? I don't know what I wish. I wish that we didn't have to think about such things as whether it works.
for sure.
Good.
I would again point out that India and Pakistan continue to have their skirmishes on the border, and they're both nuclear countries. India
Yeah.
and China have skirmishes on their borders, and they're both nuclear countries. Uh, Now, luckily, it's just skirmishes and a few people here and there getting killed. Uh, but I think what this is pointing out is the risk. And I think, again, with Putin putting his nuclear weapons on high alert, as does the U.S., the risk of accident.
No, but the U.S. hasn't.
No, the U.S. Has about 1,500 nuclear weapons on alert that can be sent off within 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's true. But when he put his on high alert, it meant something more than that. It means be ready. It could happen any second now. So, and the U.S. fortunately did not reply in kind. Now, what that really means empirically, operationally, I have no idea what difference it makes, whether it's high alert or just the regular launch on warning arrangement.
Correct.
But it's not fun in any case. And it's a lot more. I mean, as Graham Allison was pointing out, that, most people kind of think, well, nothing has happened and nobody would really use them and don't worry about it and so forth. But he said Biden knows better and knows how very, once you get into matching each other in terms of your military buildup, it's a very short distance that may be unstoppable to escalating into nuclear exchanges.
Correct. And I think now the worry is that they've developed these, quote, tactical nuclear weapons, which are small nuclear weapons to be, quote, used on the battlefield. And uh, if they are used, then escalation to the strategic, large nuclear weapons that are aimed at cities is a very short step from
Mm-hmm.
away from that.
Yeah, no question about it. Um, well, what are we able to do about it? The thing about this war that makes is so discouraging is that until war breaks out, you have peace activists talking about a whole range of different options that we should be trying out and how we're going to try to bring peace this way and that way. But when you actually have the bloodshed going, I feel so helpless. There is almost nothing that I can think to do that would stop the bloodshed, that would end the war. We are completely at the mercy of Putin, because when he says he's ready to stop, it will stop. And until he does, there's nothing we can do to stop it. And there's not much that we could do to protect people. I think there are a couple of things there's only one thing that I can think of that would be slightly promising that I haven't heard them doing yet. And that is, I had this conversation with Paul Milet the other day, who's a retired colonel, and he suggested, and we agreed, it would be a great idea to somehow drop leaflets or somehow inform the Russian soldiers that if they defect, and so many of them are really unwilling and unhappy about being in this war, that if they just come out and surrender, that they will be treated well. They will be put into a safe haven until the war is over. And then if they feel they can go home and want to, they can do it. But if they feel that it would be too safe, but not unsafe for them to return home because of recriminations, then they'll be given safe passage to another country and an opportunity to get a new job and a new citizenship and so on. So I betcha if we could reach a lot of those Russian soldiers, that would be a very attractive proposition, because otherwise they know a lot of them are going to be killed. And many of them really don't want to be there.
Uh, that is certainly an interesting proposition, Meta. The problem is, as always, is that we're not an individual. We have family members, we have relatives, and they are, quote, back home in the host country. And so, if you do something that displeases your government, i.e., sort of treason or crossing the line, as you're suggesting, then the uh, country where your relatives are is going to look uh, not favorably on those people, and that those people, therefore, will be revenge will be taken out. So that certainly is a problem. I think, though, what has happened, and there's certainly been numerous precedents, is again to have a ceasefire that actually does work. And this is, again, is the problem: is the lack of trust between the two sides. Is that to have a ceasefire. Now, we in Rotary have done this with vaccinations, had a ceasefire so that vaccination of children could occur.
Mhm.
It's been done in Latin America. It was done during the Civil War in Sri Lanka. And, one might say Putin didn't do anything until after the Olympics, because, again, the Olympics traditionally has been a time when no wars take place. So that is a possibility to strive for, and then to reinforce the negotiations and dialogue. I think whatever happens is that you're going to end up with dialogue at the end, because really in war there's no winners. One side may declare a victory, um, but really that there's no winners, because a whole lot of people have gotten killed. A whole lot of expenses been done on terms of weapons, which again is crazy, because you build something and then you destroy it. So your money's going up in smoke, literally.
Mhm.
Uh, so it's profitable for the weapon manufacturers on either side to keep the conflict going. You don't want it to escalate, obviously, to nuclear, because then that's
But yeah,
suicide.
but Richard, we're both peaceniks and we think this way. But if you were living in Bucha before, a few weeks ago, and you had any idea of what was going to come, what would you do? Wouldn't you want weapons? And wouldn't you and I want them to have weapons to defend themselves? I honestly don't know. I mean, when you get to real war, stopping a war that's ongoing is, I mean, the peace people simply haven't any really good methods and how to protect people in those situations. Yes, help them get out. Yes, bring food to them. But then if you have people bombing their hospitals and then tying their hands behind their back and shooting them in the back of the head, what do you wish for these people to do to protect themselves? I really don't have any good answers. Yes, if you do what we tell you to do 20 years ago, and we built up the kind of institutions that we need, then this wouldn't have happened. That's the kind of advice we can give that's really meaningful. But when it comes to actually protecting people in a war, we don't have any ideas. We have notions about how to maintain a resistance, civilian-based defense, and civil resistance an occupied territory. Absolutely, but the Russians haven't just occupied Bucha; they have, or Mariupol, they have destroyed it, and every city that they're taking, they're destroying. So, what can you do to protect those people? I have no idea. Do you?
I certainly hear what you're saying, Meta, and I certainly agree with you. Uh, the evidence is that uh, uh, fighting and aggression breeds more aggression, unfortunately. Uh, the civil resistance that you alluded to is just as effective as fighting.
If they're being decent to you, if the Russians had come in and occupied Bucha, I would have a lot of good tips for what the people of Bucha should do to try to maintain some kind of resistance. That would be fine. But then, when they're rounding them up and just going house to house and shooting them point blank, or tying them up, or and so on, that's not occupation, and there's no resistance to that unless you actually use violence. And somebody uses violence, but it's they're using it against you, and I don't know what else to tell people.
Well, this is the sad state of affairs, for sure. And, and again, the use of rape is another problem that has become uh, now, uh, I wouldn't say a normal, but certainly a very common occurrence in all wars now, wars in Africa, wars here in Ukraine, that
I
rape is
wonder if
now.
it has always been. Is this something new? I haven't heard anybody talk about, when Athens would go to war against Sparta or someplace. Did they? I don't think they raped people. Um, but is this kind of a new idea? How new?
No, no, it's definitely not a new idea. I mean, the men were killed and the women were taken back as domestics, as slaves, as concubines, whatever.
Yeah.
Um, so it's certainly not new, but we're certainly hearing about it more, and it's being used as a way of creating fear, intimidating a whole population. And I think what has changed in warfare is that it used to be the men that fought and died, but now the majority of people are civilians, not the soldiers. You're probably safer being a soldier than being a civilian. The cities that are being destroyed, and the cities are civilian. It's not the military targets.
Let's look to the end of the war. Now let's assume, I don't know whether there's any lesson that the world should already have taken from this war so far, except to say it shouldn't have happened, and that there should have been mechanisms to protect people that could have been invoked as soon as the possibility of an attack from Russia became realistic, as soon as they began massing troops on the border, etc. The United Nations should have some sort of military force. Let's call it a peace force, a peacekeeping force, but a peace force, because it would include more than military. It should include civilians, social workers, mediators, and negotiators, and energy providers, and healthcare and all of that. They should have gone to Ukraine and positioned themselves there to defend those people, and if need be, to protect against invasion. Now we need to, if at a minimum, there needs to be change in the international system that will provide some kind of police force that you can call when you're about to be attacked. I mean, as in civilian life, if somebody's breaking in your window, you call the cops and say, "Come quick," and because this guy's coming in. So and maybe you actually want to have something that you can, bear spray that you can use or something against them until the police get there. There need to be some mechanism for people to defend themselves. But really, there's nothing up there of that kind on the international level. Peacekeepers should have been sent into the Donbass, 8 years ago, and tried to bring peace to what was already a conflict. They should have intervened, but we should have a system that. And by the way, the United Nations Security Council just had their meeting, and of course the Russians would say we didn't do it. Those dead bodies lying in the street. Well, I don't know who they are, but we didn't do it. And I honestly, they can veto any kind of action that people might want to take. So there've got to be some lessons learned, even from the mistakes that have been made so far, because everybody knows now that we should have had some mechanism for protecting people. United Nations, no wonder Zelensky's mad at the UN. He says, you can't do it. So why don't you just dissolve yourself and admit that you can't do it? He's right. If they can't do it, they should do something different and start of pretending that they're there to protect people when they can't and won't even try. They're not in position to legally. Russia can block any kind of effort to protect those people in Ukraine.
I certainly agree with you, Meta. I would give examples of where the UN has their blue helmets, their peacekeeping force. Cyprus is an obvious example between the Turks and the Greeks side on that island. There was the peacekeeping force in Rwanda. Unfortunately, it wasn't given the mandate strong enough to prevent the atrocities that occurred there. And I think this is the problem, is that we have the structure, but we don't have the manpower. We haven't put our resources there.
We don't have the structure because the UN veto for the Security Council there's no exception.
Okay, in that it's ironic, I find, is that what is consensus? Consensus is to me is to come to a mutual understanding. And in the formation of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, you had 122 countries work to create it. One country voted against it, the Netherlands, and Singapore abstained. So to me, that was consensus. When I've been to the UN and in meetings with the Non-Proliferation Treaty, it works by, quote, consensus, which, as you say, and same in the Security Council, it means that one country has the veto, and as a result, nothing gets accomplished. So it's not mutual understanding at all. Ironically, it means that I've got the veto. And I certainly agree with you that that is what needs to change. And I think various heads of government did try to negotiate. Various Macron from France went and visited Putin. Bennett from Israel is going back and forth, even as we speak, trying to negotiate a peace. But I think when we have unions that disagree with their companies, they go to binding arbitration. And unfortunately, we don't have that. I'm working with an Ernest Thiessen who has come up with a computer model based on a Nobel laureate, Nash, on mediation.
I did a talk show with him.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I actually had the idea of working with him on, he's going to do another simulation, or like, I don't like the word game, because people think if you're playing games during a war, you're not serious. And in fact, he had me invite a couple of Russians to participate and be the players representing Russia in this new simulation that he's putting on,
Yeah.
to see if they can find solutions that would be mutually advantageous, or at least better than the things that are on the table now. And my one of my friends in Russia didn't answer. I guess he's scared. He has every reason to be scared. But the other one said, "Well, this is wartime, and we don't play games in war." So anyway, but go ahead and talk about Thiessen, because I think um, his idea is worth trying. It would come up with a list of possible deals on this or that would be the most likely, the most promising, where you could get possibly some agreement. Whether or not they would make any real advance, I think is another point. But go ahead, tell us about, because I know you were part of this game they played on, what is it, Cashtan or Cash Land or
Cashland.
something? Yeah,
Cashland.
you
Yeah.
did it as part of the Rotarian project, right?
Correct. I don't see it as a game. It's a simulation. Uh, and they first looked at how to negotiate between the indigenous people and the farmers and the BC government during the flooding that occurred out in BC.
Did they? I didn't know about that one.
Now that was the first simulation.
Oh,
Then we did a simulation in that simulated the situation in Kashmir, so hence Cash Land,
mhm.
uh, between India and Pakistan and the World Bank to look at uh, what will happen with the climate change, with the Himalayan glaciers disappearing, and therefore the water coming down through the Indus River decreasing in volume. And of course, the Indus flows first through India and then into Pakistan. And it's the treaties say that India can take X amount of water, and that may not leave enough for Pakistan. So that's certainly a scenario. And then, of course, now we have the Ukraine. And so he's come up with a new simulation. But
Mhm.
I think the thing is that you need to have compulsory arbitration, because while there, quote, was dialogue, again, uh, people would come to the table and say, well, we're not budging on this and that. And so there really wasn't any dialogue. And until you get compulsory arbitration mandated, then you end up, unfortunately, with a war.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, are you going to participate in this new go round where they're setting it up right now? Because I noticed Thiessen put me on his mailing list, and I'm getting information that is sort of the team of people is assembling to play this game. I don't know what else to call it.
Well,
It's
I call
based
it a
on game.
simulation. It's a
All
simulation.
right.
Um, it's quote fictional because obviously you don't have all the um, high level answers and questions to do. So you do as best you can in a simulation.
Mm-hmm.
So it is simply that it's a simulation until you can get the involved parties to participate. The hope, though, is that because he has now worked this out, that that the parties can come together and utilize this simulation. And what the simulation has shown is that it has improved above the status quo.
Mhm.
So,
Find some package that would be a better deal than anything so far that they can see.
correct,
Yeah.
correct.
One of the neat things in that game, I mean, it's based on game theory, but it is they make a list of issues that are thorny problems that have to be resolved. Let's say 20 issues, and then they ask each player to weight it and say how important this issue is to them. And I think that is very, very much a factor in democracy that should be played up, because when we vote, we each have one person, one vote, and we vote for or against something. But if we had each of us had 20 votes, and we could allocate them, we could spend them the way we want by saying, this issue is really, really important to me. I'm going to use 10 of my votes on this one, and then I'll use one on this one and two on that one, and so on until I've used all of my 20 up. Then the weighting of how important something is to me would really count in the long run. And that's really what people care about, I think, is that some things are much more important to them. So that I would be, there might be some things that I would just not answer. I would not bother to vote on. But somebody else might think that that's really important to them. So a few people would vote on that issue, and it would come out one way or another, win or lose, but it might not be as salient as some of the other issues. And what's important to me might not be important to you. So I like that idea of building that in, and I wish that it were somehow part of our voting schemes in general.
I think that's a wonderful idea, Meta. And that's what Ernest Eason is trying to do with this simulation.
Mm-hmm.
It's the way to come to an agreement. And again, I want to stress the importance of women. What they have found is that women tend to look at the root causes of a conflict,
Hmm.
and therefore their settlement is much longer lasting. Men try to come to a settlement, which is based on power and money and whatnot, and that settlement, unfortunately, often doesn't look at the root causes, which then harbor in the background, and so the peace accords are not as long lasting.
That's interesting. Is there a piece of research on that? Because I hadn't heard of that.
Yes.
That women tend to look at root causes more. Is this really established, or is that just
No, no, research has shown that.
really? Oh, okay. So no wonder we're so much nicer than men. I don't like that. I don't like that. I mean, women sometimes, get on their high horse and think good women make good policies and men don't. I don't think so. Anyway, I know some nasty women.
Oh, for sure, for sure. You can't go to generalize to specifics.
Yeah. Anyway, I'd like to, before we quit, I want to get back to this thing, because I want to emphasize that, to my mind, the real problem is this veto in the Security Council, because security issues, preventing wars or sending peacekeepers or doing anything to intervene and take a position, it's always got to go through the Security Council, and they have a veto. And so we know that, at least in the Cold War, everybody was lined up on one side or another, and you knew how they were going to vote. Well, it's now, of course, it's very obvious that Russia is going to vote one way, and everybody else practically will. Well, not everybody. They've got some people on their side. They've bought off Africa pretty well, and maybe China and India. I don't know. Anyway, we need to get rid of the veto. It's extremely important, and we're not going to be able to. There is no way around it, because not only Russia, but even the US and all the other P5 countries would refuse to allow for any changes that would weaken or diminish their veto power. So I have to say, and I haven't tried to organize anybody to see how many people would agree with me, but I think we've got to go around the UN now. I think we have to start up something like a new voluntary movement that would have world citizens, people join for $1 a year and become world citizens and form their own, what would be equivalent to a parliamentary assembly at the UN, but it would be voted on by individual citizens, and it wouldn't represent nations, it would represent all the citizens who've decided to join. So we create this alternative scheme that people can join. And if we start making better decisions through this body, and I have some ideas about how they could be done, then it would gain legitimacy. People could see, well, this outfit comes up with at least some sensible policies, where the UN itself is stymied and stuck and can't make any real move in terms of protecting people from potential war. So I don't know whether anybody would take that seriously, but to me, we've got to the point now where it's really clear that this veto policy is going to stop anything that needs to be done to protect us in the future. And we have to do something different, like starting over, not to try to abolish the UN, just run this parallel outfit, just start it up voluntarily and run it until we can use it as a demonstration, and people then would say, well, look, we've got the UN, and then we've got this other outfit. And look, and they're making much better decisions. And if they were in charge, then we'd have some protection. What do you think?
I fully agree with you. Certainly, other people have suggested this as well. The General Assembly works on the majority rule principle, and if it's a serious thing, then it's a two-thirds majority. So I think giving much more power to the General Assembly and decreasing power of the Security Council is the way to go. I'd just also like to put in a plug, though, that I am optimistic for people power, power to the people, because we are the people that do elect governments. And I think that people need to speak out a whole lot more. And what Sharon Tennyson, your guest who unfortunately isn't here, what she has tried to do is to build trust through people's relationships. So she would take Americans over to Russia and then bring Russians over back to the US. And she's done this many, many times with hundreds of thousands of individuals who have done this. And she's brought over Russian entrepreneurs who have been matched up with American entrepreneurs, and the Americans have been coaches and inspiring and role models for the Russians and teaching them what they know, and then they've taken that back to Russia and become very successful business people. In Rotary, we have a program called Youth Exchange, where we bring students, high school students from one country, and have them visit and spend a year in another country and go to school and learn about that. We used to do group study exchanges. Now it's vocational exchanges between countries. And we have what's called an inter-country committee, where again, people from one country build relationships with people in another country, usually a hostile country. So after the war, the first intercountry committee was between France and Germany. And we now have them between India and Pakistan. We have them in the Middle East. Uh, and, we certainly have them elsewhere. And so this is a way for ordinary citizens to, one, understand their counterpart, to see how they live and work by actually visiting them, and then can actually spread the word that they're not our enemy. And we're doing this with ecumenical religions. I'm just reading a book now, I Refuse to Be Enemies, written by an American Jew and a Pakistani woman.
Mhm.
And so by doing projects between uh, hostile countries, I think does can overcome uh, the lack of trust and build trust, and hopefully create peace in the world.
Well, I have been that route, and I am much less optimistic. And I don't. This is the last time. We're toward the end of the hour, and there's a whole new conversation that would start about this. But I have a lot of friends in Russia. I've been to Russia many times. I wrote a book about Russia, and so on. And so, but what I find is that relationships with my Russian friends. There you go.
Okay, Russian Quest for Peace and Democracy by Metta Spencer.
Thank you very much for buying it. It didn't get much publicity when it came out. It was a bad timing. Everybody was sick and tired of talking about the Cold War. But thank you for having it. But I have relationships, and now they're useless because these people, some of them are afraid to talk to me, and I don't know which ones are afraid or not. I've been told, do not call anybody, do not send emails, or do not send Facebook posts to people, because they'll be sent to jail for 15 years if they just receive something from you with information that the government doesn't want them to have. So I don't know how many of my friends are not responding to me because they're afraid, and how many of them are actually pro Putin. But as of now, it is not as an insignificant number who have actually switched over and now believe whatever the government is telling them and favor the government's war on Ukraine. So it's an extremely disappointing situation. And I've talked to one young man in Russia who was bold enough to talk on our global town hall the other day, and it was a really sad story. He was saying, he felt grateful to us for supporting him in his position, because he said he's losing his friends, that they have big emotional fights now, and people he's lost his friends, and it's very upsetting to him. So you can build these friendships, but these friendships are whatever the government allows them to have. As long as the government says you can be friends and associate in such and such a way, then they're allowed to, and you can develop good relationships. But when the government says nothing doing, people comply, and we all rally around the flag during a war. Everybody does. It's almost impossible not to. But this, it doesn't say much for your method of bringing peace, frankly, because it's such a fragile situation. National identity and national governments have a whole lot more power than you or I, or than our friendships do. Sorry, fella. I don't want to say that, but that's my conclusion.
Certainly, what you're saying, that there's definitely a truth to it. but people don't go off to war to fight for democracy and freedom. They go off to war because their friends are going off to war.
They go out to war because they're told to.
Correct. But I mean, they sign up because one person does it, and then the others fall into line. So
I think it's more nowadays, it's all mass media. Whatever the government says you're allowed to publicize is the only information people get. And that's what they believe.
And the other problem is this thing,
Yeah.
your cell phone, because when you look up something, and it doesn't matter what, the cell phone says if you like that, you ought to try this, and this is always to the extreme. And so what's happened is that people have been polarized.
Mhm.
They're polarized with the propaganda, which has become much more effective than during the days of the Nazis and Goebbels. One, you're quite correct when the media is controlled by the state. Two, this thing has polarized us as well.
Mhm.
We tend to now get our information through social media, and again, it's self-fulfilling prophecy. You are kept in your own little silo, and you're fed information that maintains your point of view. So you're not getting different points of view. And I think this was the trouble here in Canada with the Conservative Party, is that Erin O'Toole tried to appeal to the middle class during the last election, and there was no middle people in the middle anymore. They both gone off to the extremes.
Mhm.
And you're seeing this also in the United States,
Much more so in the United States.
very much. And so I'm working with my colleagues in Rotary who agree with me, but again, they are afraid to speak out because people of a different point of view are also very powerful in their organization. And so they don't want to speak out because of quote repercussions from their colleagues.
Yep, that's true. There we are. Okay, we've explored all the negative signs, and I don't know that there are any positive ones left. I'd be happy to think of some jolly note to end on, but I don't think of any. So too bad. But it's been a useful conversation. I don't know whether it's useful or not, but I think it's true. Everything we've said is sort of true, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Richard. I appreciate your being here. And I've sort of enjoyed this. It's kind of hard to enjoy things that are so disappointing, but there you go. Onward, we will prevail. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Meta.
Okay, bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Project Save the World produces one of these shows 3 days a week and sometimes more. This is episode number 433. You can watch these or listen to them as audio podcasts on our website, tosavetheworld.ca. Eventually, we even post the transcripts there. And when you get there to the website, look around because we have conversations going on there all the time about 6 global issues, plus potential reforms in governance, economics, and civil society. To find a particular talk show, enter its title or episode number in the search bar, or the name of one of the guest speakers. And after you've watched or listened, scroll down and share your own thoughts about the show with the other viewers. This is a place for dialogue, so please join in. I'll see you there.